I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them. This message from Yahweh to Moses cries out to us today in the protests about the continued killing of Black people and people of color in our society. A note, last night there was a shooting and killing in Portland, Oregon. Portland has been the site of nightly protests about the racism in this country. There was a conflict between the Portland protesters and supporters of Trump, who I understand started coming into Portland on Saturdays for the last 3 weeks. I am pretty certain that this time the death was a white man who was shot in the chest and died on the site. We've heard the common reaction of whites to Black Lives Matter. That reaction is, or response is often, all lives matter. Yes, that is our end hope, but it is not true yet. Another reaction is the protests should all be peaceful. I have come to believe that that is a distraction. It's a way for us not to deal with the issue. Where did the violence start? And why did we not insist that those instigators were peaceful? Why does the protest movement get blamed and dismissed for the violence? Let's look at where the violence started. For us, it started in the kidnapping of Africans from their villages and being put in chains, brought over here in slave ships, and sold as property. It continued in the disruption of families and children being torn from their parents and sold. It continues today in our societies. It is sometimes said of me, or I am told, that I am very New York. I'm not sure what that means. I tend to think it's not a positive statement. However, New York is seen as a leftist, liberal, multi-educated place to live and to work. And yet racism is alive and well in New York. A number of years ago, you may remember, there was the white woman jogger who was raped in Central Park as she was attacked as she was jogging. Eventually, 5 young Black men were brought to trial and convicted and imprisoned. It turns out now that they were all innocent. They lost to our justice system their youth, and their adulthood. At the time of these media frenzy about the rape, I kept hearing from Black people, why is it that this is front page news for weeks and months in our newspapers, but when Black women are raped, there is no notice, there is no media. It is as if things that happen to Black people are dismissed as unimportant. So we look at the many instances of violence and injustice, but we only start speaking of it now as directed to the protesters. An analogy. Police personnel have shot and killed unarmed Blacks. The list goes on way beyond George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Do a search on your computer to go back even in just the last 5 years. I believe most white people do not believe that these killings mean that all police departments and all police are racists and trying to kill Blacks. However, when we look at violence that takes place at the protests, we do tend to lay the blame on the protests without looking at the percentage of protesters who were involved or what their motives might have been. I want to share this quote from Frederick Douglass. Those who profess to favor freedom and yet depreciate agitation are people who want crops without plowing the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the roar of its many waters. The struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both, but it must be a struggle. And now here we go. Power concedes nothing without its demand. It never did, and it never will. To put it another way, none of us who have the good things, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in our society, want these good things threatened or changed. I do not understand why, after all this time of inequality between white people and people of color, our young people, both people of color and white, have had enough. I do not know why the murder of George Floyd has finally made Black people say enough is more than enough, and why white people have started to pay attention. But I think it is a sign of hope for our future as a society, that it is a sign of progress for the creation of the kingdom of God. Yahweh tells Moses, I have observed the misery of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry on account of their taskmasters. Indeed, I know their suffering, and I have come down to deliver them from the Egyptians. This movement for equality and justice is not something we can just watch. It is a gift both to whites and people of color. This inequality has dehumanized both enslavers and the enslaved. It has undermined the commandment to love each other and has hidden the image of God in us. The Anglican way usually seeks a middle path. There is no such middle path here. Either we are all the children of God or we are not. Either we look for ways to learn about the color divide and search for ways to end it, or we miss the opportunity of our lifetime. I plan to be sharing some resources with you over the next weeks and months, examining our prejudices, examining our blind spots, whatever they are. It's part of soul searching. It is difficult, but necessary for our spiritual growth. Our gospel reminds us, if any want to become my followers, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. This is our call in these times.